Is that the,
Mike's on.
Yeah.
oh, it's not?
Right, everyone, Mike's good. We're good to go.
Okay, 'cause I have one.
Sherry on, is that Mike on?
Well, I'm not gonna.
All right, we are going to kick off this regular meeting of the City Plan Commission. It is 4:45. Today is Tuesday, September 17th, 2024. I guess it's 4:46 now. Let's go around with a roll call, starting with Will.
Sherry.
Dave Caldwell.
Charlotte Lipschitz.
Cheyenne Manjikar, DPD staff.
Bob Azar, staff.
Sharon Garner, legal counsel.
And I'm Michael Gazdaco, Chair. Everyone received the minutes from the August 20th, 2024 meeting. Hopefully you've had a chance to review, mark them up if any edits are needed. If not, I'd accept a motion to approve at this time.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? The minutes pass. Mr. Azar, Director's Report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Just a little update on the comprehensive plan. City Council opened up the public hearing last night, and we had a couple hours of lively debate. Close to 50 people testified. And what I would say is that the testimony we heard was very similar to what you had been hearing for the several months that you were considering the comprehensive plan. I don't think we heard anything really novel, but it was a good opportunity, obviously, for the Committee on Ordinances and other members of the council who were in attendance. The hearing was continued until October 2nd to give us time to sort of consolidate all the comments that we heard and to confer internally about whether we want to make some or recommend some amendments to the plan. So far, things seem to be going very well, I will say. And we'll talk a little bit later today about zoning changes that we've been working on to implement the comprehensive plan. Your chair was in attendance and made a brief statement at the end. I don't know, Michael, if you have any.
No, I mean, my statement to the council pretty much echoes what you said. It felt very good hearing that there were no red flags or nothing out of left field that came from the public comment. I told the city council members present that, everything that you heard tonight, it's great that you've heard. We've heard that and much more. And so the plan you have in front of you has heard all of these comments, these concerns, these ideas, these in support of it. And we've weighed that and made our decision to forward this comprehensive plan to you. So it's already taken into consideration. There are obviously tweaks that can still happen. There's evolution of thought, but I thought overall, I was very pleased that nothing came out of left field. I was pretty much expecting exactly what came out of everyone's mouth last night. And you guys have heard all of them, all of the comments. So I think it's in a good position right now, and the city council members seem receptive to the plan. That's it. Then with that, we will roll right into the first agenda item. Well,
Do you want to take?
yeah, let's start off. We're going to call an item out of order. We'll start with case number 5. Agenda item number 5, excuse me. It's a major land development project, Unified Development Review, public hearing, case number 24-050 MA for 400 Elmwood Ave.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, John Garrett, on behalf of the applicant. Is this on?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yes. Thank you.
Let me address this. I think that there was some comments that were received relatively recently with respect to this project. And rather than, we'd like to be able to have a meeting with them, a community meeting, in order to talk about the project with those that had some concerns with it. So as a result, we would request a continuance of this matter to the date certain of the next council commission meeting.
That would be October 15.
Okay, so you're requesting a continuance to the October 15th, 2024 meeting.
Yes,
Um,
Mr. Chairman.
Anyone care to make a motion on that?
I'll make a motion to grant the continuance as requested
To October 15th,
to
2020.
October 15th. Commission meeting.
Second.
All right, we'll go around and take a vote. Will? Dave? Aye. Charlotte?
Aye.
And I vote aye.
Thank you very much.
We will make sure
And
that
Mr.
we
Chairman-
continue this to date certain, October 15th, so that
Thank you
your
very much.
advertising doesn't.
I was watching on YouTube last night and I did see you up there. I just wish that they had drilled you with some questions.
They didn't drill me at all. They
They
called me up at the end and they gave me a softball. It was, I did give them, the ability to do so because I said, I'm on the other side
Exactly.
this time. And usually I'm used to seeing you come before us.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you, Attorney Gary.
John, you may want to, or you, oh, no, never mind. I apologize.
We'll go back in order now that we've heard, agenda item number 5, which we've continued. We'll go back to, agenda item number 1, which is, case number 19-015 MI 311 MA, 311 9th Street. It's a request for extension.
Hello, good evening. Tanessa Azar from Moses Ryan on behalf of the property owner, which is Swap.
Good evening.
Good evening. So we're asking for a 1-year extension of this preliminary plan. Swap purchased this property back in the end of December of 2023. The executive director of Swap is here, Carla, in case you have any questions for her. But essentially, this is a 41-unit mixed-use building. CPC actually did review this for final plan, even though it wasn't actually issued the final plan. There are a couple of conditions that still need to be met for this one. And we need a little bit more time to effectuate that. So we're asking for this extension of the preliminary plan to kind of cover it. Part of it is getting state approvals and things like that. And then if there's any changes, all the conditions were made the same. If there's any changes to come back to CPC, but this is just to give some time to finish up those approvals. They're working with RIDOT and historic and things of that nature. So we'd kindly ask that you grant the extension for the good cause shown.
This, commissioners, is, for, the property at the corner of Knight and Westminster, in the West End. You may remember it. Okay, any,
Does it expire?
So I believe we had it for an expiration of October. I don't have the exact one in front of me. It's the beginning of October is when it expires, is what the record shows. It's October 11th, I believe.
any questions of the applicant? With that, I don't think we have to take public comment, but I always like to, just out of abundance of caution. Is there anyone here from the member of the public who wishes to speak on this matter? If you're joining us virtually, please raise your virtual hand or press *9. And I don't see anyone, so we'll close public comment. Pretty public comment. Is there someone to speak on this one?
On 321 night.
311 Knight.
So, yeah, 311 night.
No, we're good? Okay. All right, then we still have public comment closed. I think it was a different applicant who came before us, so there was a property transfer. They're trying to fulfill their terms of the preliminary plan. I see no reason why not to continue this. I want to see the project move though. I look at that vacant lot frequently.
The goal is still to move with the project.
Perfect, great.
I agree, motion to extend.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. All right, we'll go around and do a vote. Will?
Aye.
Dave? Aye. Charlotte?
Aye.
And I vote aye.
Thank
Best
you
of
very
luck.
much for your time.
Moving right along to agenda item number 2, it's referral number 3587. It's abandonment of a portion of Woodside Road.
All right, thanks, Mr. King. To provide a quick introduction before the petitioner begins. So this is a request to abandon a portion of Woodside Road. Woodside Road runs from west to east and it turns northward into Ruby Road. And so the applicant is requesting to abandon the undeveloped portion of Woodside Road that lies between Ruby and Ridgeway Ave. So, yeah, the applicant's here and they can tell us more about it.
Thank you. My name is Greg Esterbrooks. I'm an attorney with Kelly Susan Parmenter in Providence, appearing on behalf of the petitioner Joseph DePina, the property owner. This is a petition for abandonment of just a portion of Woodside Road. It's a paper road that's unused.
Speak into the meeting.
Sure. Is that better? Okay,
That way our viewers at home can hear you as well,
sure.
and everyone in the room.
So as I was saying, this is a petition for abandonment of just a portion of Woodside Road. That's a paper road. It's unused and undeveloped. There's a wooded area that runs through where the paper road is. There's actually a gazebo at the western end of the road that's sitting right in the paper road. That's behind a residence that's currently existing on one of the lots. My client owns 7 of the 8 abutting lots to this paper road. The only lot that my client does not own is lot 720, which has access to that lot on the improved portion of Woodside Road, which we are not seeking to abandon. So this petition for abandonment does not adversely affect anyone's rights. I reviewed the project planner's report and recommendation. I agree with everything in there and fully support his conclusions. So I would ask that the commission adopt the planner's report in full and refer this matter to city council with a positive recommendation. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
My first question is, have you been in contact with the owner of parcel 7, lot 720?
We attempted to contact that owner. My understanding from my client is that he lives in Florida. And that we were unable to get in touch with him, but we did send him the required notice. I don't know if he's here tonight, but we haven't spoken with him.
Normally, maybe incorrect, but normally if you have an abandonment, half goes to either side unless the other affirmatively does not want that half. Is that normally?
Yeah,
the way it goes?
that's right. And any approval by the city council would need to involve this property owner. And if that property owner is not interested in their half of the road, they could work that out with the petitioner.
Okay.
But, you know, you don't necessarily have to be comfortable with, the arrangement between property owners at this stage. Certainly by the time it gets to the city council, that would have to be worked out.
Because we're just opining on the abandonment per se, not where the abandonment or
Yeah.
the property lines end up.
Yeah, you're looking at it from the perspective of good planning practice,
Okay.
your own internal procedures and the comprehensive plan.
Okay. Fair enough. Counselors, do you have any questions of the applicant? All right, let's hear the staff report and then we'll open up to public comment.
Sure, commissioners, and we can go through your criteria for abandonment.
And so you gotta get close to that thing.
Okay, so we are going through your criteria for abandonment. And so if you take a look at the map, you will see that lots 516 to 521 at the southern portion of the abandonment area are owned by the petitioner, while lots 494 and 720 do have access from other avenues. And so based on that, the abandonment area only appears to be useful for accessing property that it abuts. Therefore, we don't feel the abandonment would have an adverse impact on the public interest. We don't foresee a negative impact on future land uses, as the street is not essential to providing access to other parts of the city. As discussed, the owners of abutting lots will need to agree to the abandonment. And we would ask that all abutters come to an agreement. And no physical or legal access will be denied to any other property as a result of the abandonment. The applicant will need to grant any easements for maintenance of public facilities, and they have provided a petition and plan. So based on that, we recommend that you make a positive recommendation to the city council, subject to these conditions. All abutters shall come to an agreement on a plan for abandonment prior to final approval. The petitioner shall apply for an administrative subdivision prior to appearing before the city council. And that we ask that the petitioners grant any necessary easements for property access, utility access, and maintenance.
Now, one thing did pop up while I was reviewing this, prior to this meeting. I noticed that there's a structure on this current road, public right of way, paper, albeit, that the access, the main driveway to the main house, it looks like it's situated on lot 517, is on this paper road, along with the access to the garage on what looks to be a garage on 494. Are these actions of the applicant, or did the applicant come into possession of this property, purchase it after these structures, this driveway, all of that was built?
My understanding is it's the latter, that was all there, and then the applicant came into ownership of the property thereafter, and we attached conceptual plans to our application, so the applicant plans on developing the property and essentially turning the paper road into a private road that he will take care of, and it'll no longer be a public responsibility.
Yeah, those plans were on our in our packages online. They're pretty they look ambitious. I look forward to seeing those. All right, any other questions before we open up to public comment? All right, this is a public hearing, so we'll open up public comment now at this time. If you're joining us at home, or sorry, you don't have to be at home. If you're joining us virtually, please press *9 or raise your virtual hand in the bottom middle section of your screen to be called on. And we do have someone here in the audience who would like to speak on this matter. Miguel Youngs. So you can go back and we'll call you back up if we need anything else from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Did Councilman Pichardo leave as well?
He did.
Okay.
Yeah, he left.
I wanted to make sure that he didn't want to say anything also.
No, yeah,
Go right ahead.
great. Hi, everyone. I'll be very brief. I'm Miguel Youngs. I'm the Deputy Policy Director for the City Council. I'm actually here on behalf of Councilor Miguel Sanchez, whose board this proposal is in. He regrettably can't be here because he is at the Finance Committee right now in City Hall, but he wanted me to convey that he supports this project. He's been in meetings with the developers and they've been moving along. He's especially excited to see some more housing in his ward, especially in this neighborhood. So that's really it. He supports it, the councilor supports it, and as it goes along, he's gonna stay engaged. That's all I got.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's always nice to hear from the council people whose wards these abandonments and proposals lie in. That's the only person on the sign-in sheet. Do we have anyone else in our real audience here or in our virtual audience outside of this room? And seeing none, we will close the public comment portion of this agenda item. I mean, this road has no useful purpose. I'm more than happy to put it on the tax rolls again. The plan is quite ambitious, so I'd be interested to see how that's pulled off, but nonetheless, I think we can make better use of this than a paper road owned by the city. So I'm in favor of this based on the staff report recommendations. If everyone's in agreement, someone could make a motion to advise the Committee on Public Works, the proposed abandonment to be approved subject to the conditions laid out in the staff report. Or say so moved.
So moved.
And a second. Second. There we go. We'll go around and we'll do a vote. Noel? Okay, so you're gonna, okay. Will? Dave? Aye. Charlotte?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Best of luck. Just, because we have a few, latecomers to the meeting room, 400 Elmwood, agenda item number 5 has been continued to October 15th. So if you're here for that matter, that item has been continued at the request of the applicant to October 15th. Now we'll move right into, agenda item number 3. It's case number 24-049 MI 279 Thayer Street. Most of you will recognize this development. This is a major change that's coming before us. And looks like Attorney Garrahy. You want to tee it off?
Yeah, just real quick, commissioners, this is a request for a major change to an approved project. This was a 4-story, 49-foot tall mixed-use development that we had approved some time ago. And the applicant is back and they are requesting a major change, which would involve the addition of an additional story, which would result in 4 additional dwelling units, raising the height of the building to 55 feet and 5 stories. So they are here to request a dimensional adjustment for that in addition to the requested major change, and they can walk you through the rest of the project.
Okay, Attorney Garrahy.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, John Garrahy on behalf of the applicant, Two Cousins LLC. If I first, as a matter of protocol, provide with the commission a certification of mailing and newspaper notice to ensure that it was properly advertised and noticed. Thank you very much. This project was before the commission and was approved as a major land development project some time ago. According to the requirements and the regulations, this is classified as a major change. Although I will say the 2 commercial units on the first floor and the residential units that were approved are not changing. This is only to add an additional floor and changing from 12 to 16 units and changing from 49 feet to 55 feet as a result of the additional stories and units. We do require an adjustment, dimensional adjustment, as is allowed in the section 1904 of the zoning ordinance. Bill Lavery is here from Joe Casale Engineering, and Matt Sylvia from Bisbano Architects is here, and we'll go through it. I think it's fairly straightforward. Again, the only change is the addition, which I think, the adjustment could have been made at the initial application. It was not, and so we're just here asking for that additional floor, which is quite frankly consistent with a lot of the other buildings in this area that are requesting this additional story as a result of the mixed use component of the building as allowed in the section 1904. So Bill has a PowerPoint that will make a presentation, and Matt will talk about the architectural plans.
Good evening, everyone. William Lavery Jr., Project Manager with Joe Casale Engineering. Just quickly going through the PowerPoint presentation to refresh the board with this project. Where we are, Hope Street, Cushing Street, and Meeting Street to the south, and Thayer Street. And our parcel is 279 Thayer Street, AP 13 lot 28. It's just shy of 5,000 square feet in the C2 general with the IE3 overlay district. Zooming in, these are pre-existing structures that were on the site. They have since been raised, part of construction that had commenced under the original project and the final plan approval and building permit that was issued for that project. And that project, as Attorney Garrity said, was a mixed use, multi-story building, 2 commercial units on the first floor and 3 floors above that of residential units, consisting of 12 residential units. We are proposing in here tonight for a major change, which is specifically to add an additional story to the building, which would add 4 additional residential units. Here is an updated rendering of the building, and Matt Silva with Bisbano Architects can get into it, materials and the finishes. But building is, generally the same as originally proposed, just with the original floor. A couple other renderings, a nice night shot, because the building has that feature with that band with the illuminated feature behind it. Quickly going through the floor plans, our first floor has the 2 commercial units within with a shared dining space. Commercial units are accessed off of Thayer Street. We have 2 separate entrances for residential on the north and the south, with an elevator off the north entrance. Going to the basement level, we have just storage space and utility space for the businesses. Floors 2 through 5 will be virtually the same, with 4 units on each floor, all consisting of 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. Looking at the elevations, west off of Thayer Street, this just confirms the height of the building at 55 feet. Going to the south elevation, again with the additional floor, this elevation also shows the covered access way for the residential egress door. This is the east elevation and the north elevation of the building. Further getting into parking requirements, the lot's under 10,000 square feet, so parking isn't required for the proposed development. However, the bicycle spaces are, with the new calculation, we need 4 bicycle spaces. We have a covered alleyway that is to the south of the building, and we are proposing to put outdoor covered bicycle storage at the southern end of the building. More amenities, again, you see the covered access, the concrete access way, the proposed trash location, which mimics the original project. Also, there's an access easement that was already configured under the first project, that gives egress and access to the building directly to the south. There's also going to be a gated emergency push bar for security access to the building. And again, all those other access ways will be covered to the elements. We're proposing a street tree in conformance with the city zoning ordinance. And as for utilities, 6-inch water, we have fire protection, domestic connections, sewer connection, gas, and drainage. Everything that was approved previously under the first project is still in effect and was issued under the building, with the building permit when they started commencing construction on the project. Lighting is basically just some under canopy lights recessed under the canopy areas. There's also that lighted strip that goes behind that architectural feature. So we can just go back to the renderings, and we can have Matt Silva discuss a little bit more about the building.
Thank you, Bill. Matt Silva.
One second before you proceed.
Sure.
Yeah, just a quick question, Bill. On your elevations, you show, I think, the floor height, and you show the highest point of the site. Can you just confirm what your calculation was of average grade, and then also the height of the building, which is to the roof from average grade? Just want to make sure that's on the record.
Yes, so the average grade on the elevation is the high point elevation, which is 103. And then there's the ground floor elevation.
Yeah, that can't be the,
Yeah, 100, the average grade was 100.91. That's what 100.83 was our average grade determined from the existing site conditions. And the top of the roof structure is 156.83, which gets us at the 55.
okay. 156.83
156.83, yes, that's the finished roof elevation.
minus 100.03.
Was it 183, right?
No, sorry, 101.83 was average, 100 was. So sorry.
Sorry, 101.83.
This page.
You know what, I had it on, I'm sorry, I had it on the problem.
Just noted as 101.9.
Sorry, here it is, 101.83, average grade roof is 156.83.
Okay, thank you.
With parapet 160, with stairwell,
Yeah.
the average grade 101.92.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Could you go back to five? Oh, sorry.
132.
Yes, thank you, sir. All right, Matt Silva is Bond and Associates. So I understand this isn't a design presentation, but I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the design elements that we had approved last time and also what we discussed during our pre-review meeting. So I just wanted to point out briefly that we haven't changed much of what has been seen in the previous go. We have modified some of the exterior materials. We're intending on using a fiber cement system. And we have taken into consideration some of the concerns that the city had relative to utilizing materials that were, I guess, faux in nature. So I have a sample board out here in front, which is identifying all the materials that we'll be utilizing. Along the base, we'll be using a line, please. So along that that vertical steer tower enclosure, we'll be utilizing a cashmere smooth. So these are all fiber cement panels from the same system. And this is really intended to be used for longevity and to match the look of the adjacent areas with respect to the pedestrian level.
So you're using that gray brick at the storefront level?
Yes.
That one, yeah. I know that even the wood grain is a fiber cement panel.
Correct. Yeah, they're actually all fiber cement materials.
What is the lighter of the two wood grain? Are there two different tones of wood grain?
There's only one tone of wood grain. So the ones that you're seeing on the return and the Thayer Street facade is the espresso finish. And the one that's running vertically is at the stair tower, and that's more of a stucco style finish.
Yeah, I'm wondering
you're-
about the two wood grains on your sample board. You have
Oh,
two
thank you.
different browns.
On a
Assuming the
multitask.
espresso is the one that's below the gray.
Yeah, so
The flat, you can remove the mic if you.
Yeah, it's wireless.
look at that technology, right? Okay, so the espresso finish is the one that we'll be utilizing. I'm only showing this here as a means of how it's going to be fabricated. So some of the comments that we had last time was relative to returns, window details, how are the corners going to look? So this is really just a molded corner system. So we're not gonna have any ancillary joint patterns or metal housings, if you will. It will take on that same look as the finish. So this is only for the form, not necessarily the finish. So this is the finish that we'll be utilizing.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought this, because if we had concerns before and you're coming back and asking for a major change, you open yourself to all of our design review at this time.
We know how this works.
We are very, and the vice chair may have some things to say. Does that sum up your?
Yeah, so I can field any questions that you guys may have.
Okay. My first note was just, you said, the design has already been approved, but now that you're coming back, your design elements are open to review again. You're welcome. Now, a question for Bob. Is this a major change because of the dimensional adjustment they're requesting, the additional floor, or the square foot added, or a combination of all of these?
Yeah, it's essentially because,
20% increase in building volume.
thank you, Choyan. So, 20% increase in building volume, plus they need the dimensional adjustment
Yeah.
that they hadn't been granted previously.
So even if they didn't need this adjustment, they'd still be coming to us for a major change because it was
Yeah.
more than the threshold that you can improve it
Yeah,
administratively.
now if, let's say that, they've been approved for 6 stories and it was a 7-story zone. That's something that we could approve as a minor change. But because they need the dimensional adjustment and because it's, it's basic, it was a 25% increase in the number of stories, maybe not quite in the height. It seems like they might have economized a bit in the overall height,
Right,
but, so that's why.
okay. Fair enough. Commissioners, questions of the applicant?
I have one clarifying question around your elevation. So you noted that you're not gonna have sort of metal trim elements necessarily, at least at the corner, which seems pretty clear. But you do have these vertical lines on the elevations that seem like they're maybe trim. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, just because of the way the fiber cement panels are created, you have to have a joint system. So what that's doing is us planning out where those joints are going to be, so it's not an accident on site. But essentially, these wouldn't be trim pieces. They would be basically fibrous fillers, color matched to the material itself.
Okay, that's clear.
It's not meant to look like a joint.
They try to hide it as much as possible.
Well, yeah, so I have 2 kind of design oriented comments. One is actually, if these joints are gonna be aligned, I wonder whether they just wanna be, actually, they do want some sort of metal trim or that if the joints are there, we don't try to hide them, they just become a design element on the facade. And then I think the second thing is this light strip, which I think, is convincing in your nighttime renderings, but is a little bit jarring in the daytime views. And so I actually wonder whether that wants to become thinner, still maybe like a light element, but you've established this kind of like dark palette at the front end of this building along Thayer Street, and I think that strip could I guess blend into that dark palette more and become still maybe conceal a light as you have it, but right now it's the thing that stands out against the rest of it.
The entire item isn't illuminated. It's just a slight strip on the side. So that's like an aluminum enclosure. I don't know if
Yeah,
was
right, so
misleading.
I
Okay.
think, I think that's clear, it wasn't clear to me that it was necessarily aluminum, but just, that it is something that reads as super light and super bright on the facade, whereas the rest of it kind of, is a little bit darker and more muted, I think that could, fall within that darker palette.
Like more of a dark gray instead of just like
Yeah.
a silver gray.
Or maybe even the black that the canopy
Right.
is.
Right. Any thoughts on that from the applicant? We'd be willing to take a look at modifying some of the adjustments with the owner, sure. Dave, anything?
Do we have a sense of, I mean, some of these adjacent buildings are a lot lower than they could be in the future, right?
Yes,
Is that fair to say?
that's fair to say.
Okay.
Yes, yes. Yeah, the whole street is zone C2, so 4 stories. The zoning, yeah, 4 stories, 50 feet by right, and then adjustments to go 1 or 2 stories taller.
I guess my feeling is that this is a little bit jarring in the views that were being shown because the direct neighbors are under.
Both 1 and 2 story
Yeah.
buildings, yeah.
We've seen,
Yeah.
we've seen some 4-story buildings on the street. This would
Have we
be,
seen any found?
this would be the first 5-story building, at least north of Waterman Street.
Right.
There's a 5-story building that just opened around the corner that you approved at Brook and Waterman.
Will, no? Any questions?
I'm just gonna say about the height.
Can I just ask a clarifying question of Charlotte? When you talked about the those joints, are you talking about everyone between every panel of this fiber cement?
Cause it looks like he's trying to line them up vertically with the windows.
Yeah,
The banks of
I'm
windows, right?
exactly
These-
like. I imagine there's gonna be some sort of trim at the edges of those windows, and so I guess I'm proposing that they look at continuing that trim down the facade, as something that potentially animates their.
All the way up and down and around, so it looks like the same.
Yeah, or at least to the left and the right of every window bank. I'm not sure that this necessarily needs to be a condition of, I feel more strongly about the band not being super light.
Yeah.
It's more of just a suggestion for consideration.
Yeah.
I think the band gets a little bit more intense when the building is taller. And by band, I mean the material that's concealing that.
The ACM or whatever that band is that.
Carpenter's Square.
Yeah. It's kind of what it looks like.
We'd be happy to continue to work with the designer on this.
Okay. All right, let's hear the staff report. We can always ask more questions as we go along.
Mr. Chair, so the applicant did go through, speak about the dimensions and the design of the building, as well as talk about things like parking and lighting. So based on that, based on their presentation, and because they're gonna be providing mixed use on the first story with over 50% dedicated to residential use, we do feel that it is appropriate for you to grant the requested dimensional adjustment, finding that they meet the criteria outlined in the zoning ordinance as well as in section 1005B of your development review regulations. And then moving on to the actual project, we do find that this to be consistent with the comprehensive plan, given that it conforms to neighborhood commercial mixed-use development designation of the land use map of the comprehensive plan. The use dimension, parking and landscaping and lighting will conform to the ordinance. Dimension is subject to you granting the requested adjustment for height. We don't foresee a negative environmental impact. This is a buildable lot with no apparent impediments to development, and adequate pedestrian access will be provided from Thayer Street. So based on that, we recommend that you vote to approve the major change based on the above findings, and that final plan approval be delegated to EPD staff And you'll also need to take a vote for the adjustment before that. Thanks.
Okay, well, this is a public hearing and we have at least one person who'd like to be heard on this matter. So at this time, we will open up public comment. If you're joining us virtually, at home or otherwise, I'm not going to say at home again. Home is where your computer is, which is sad, but true. Please raise your virtual hand in the bottom middle section of your screen or press *9 if you're calling in. And we have one person signed up in this room and we will call Mr. Grant Bulgarian. Long time no see, sir. He was at the city council meeting last night also.
I don't want to interrupt the conversation. Grant, it's not a good idea to lean against that table. We've seen them collapse before.
Well, we don't want that.
First.
Go ahead, name, address for the record.
Right, Grant Bulgarian, I'm the trustee of the Creek Bulgarian Trust, which owns the buildings between Olive and Meeting Street, excuse me, on the west side of Thayer Street. So they run from Spectrum India to Antonio's Pizza by the Slice to the theater to what was up until very recently Andrea's Restaurant. Up until 2014. From 1951, I can't speak to the 1923 zoning ordinance because I wasn't around for that. But from 1951 up until 2014, the zone dimension for commercial was 3 stories, not to exceed 45 feet. And Providence would have been thrilled if people were building 2- and 3-story buildings, because at the time they were only building 1-story buildings. It was only in 2014 when the city decided to ratchet it up. The argument was, well, in 45 feet, you can really fit 4 stories. So we'll make it 4 stories, not to exceed 45 feet. I objected to that. 3 stories is a nice human scale. People come to live in Providence because it's a human scale city. 4 stories is marginal. Needless to say, the city enacted the 2014 zoning ordinance and put in 4 stories, and they ratcheted up 45 feet to 50 feet. They rounded it off up, which was, never discussed ahead of time. The ink wasn't dry on that zoning ordinance. People started coming into the zoning board looking to add a 5th story. Inexcusable. No justification. So here we are, 2024. There isn't another building on Thayer Street from Waterman Street north to the end of Thayer, or the beginning of Thayer, depending on which way you want to go. That's 5 stories. There's no justification for it. I request that City Planning Commission, in the words of Nancy Reagan, just say no. 4 is more than sufficient. What I have suggested to the city in past years, and the city has ignored my suggestion, that if they want to allow incremental increase in height, there needs to be some thinking going on in terms of the width of the street that we're talking about. There needs to be some correlation. Got some wide streets, maybe a little extra footage would be not objectionable. Thayer Street's not a wide street. One lane of traffic. If you got parking on both sides, you only have parking on one side, you have two lanes of traffic. One way. Been one way ever since I've been alive. It's too narrow. Doesn't have anything to do with any of the other buildings on the street. Please just say no.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dolgarian. Is there anyone else here in the audience, who wishes to speak on this matter? Anyone in our virtual world?
We've got Lily Bogosian.
Okay,
Lily, you can go ahead.
Hello, good evening, I guess it is. I wanted to make a very brief comment about the height of the building. I know a couple of the commissioners began to express their concerns about what it looks like around being surrounded by 1- and 2-story buildings. And I know the feeling is probably that ultimately there will be very tall buildings, and so then it will blend in. But for the moment, my feeling is that not feeling, but my opinion is that at 4 stories, it's okay. And as Charlotte was saying, Commissioner was saying, the light strip, starts to really sort of stand out. And I think the reason is that the building just stands out in general when it's upscaled by 20%. So I guess I would just say that I would agree with Mr. Dolgarian and the 2 commissioners about the scale of the building with regard to its height. So and also about the strip of light, which I think will stand out even greater given its height. So thank you very much, and good evening.
thank you. Is there anyone else joining us, either in the room or in the virtual room, who would like to speak on this matter? Seeing none, we will close the public comment portion of this agenda item at this time. Yes, we'll allow you to come back just briefly, Mr. Attorney Carey. And then I'll ask you to sit there because we may have questions for you.
I've addressed this point before, and I want to address it again. So there's a policy in the city with respect to what's in the zoning ordinance, and this is incentive zoning that's added in, so that if the developer does something, they get something in return. There's reduction in parking, there's additional height, there's additional density. So, and I've argued, and I know this board disagrees with me about this point, but I think that if the developer is going to do something, they should be entitled to get something, and should not have to leave it to with all due respect, to arbitrary discretion. And I don't think this board is arbitrary in any respect. But there is a policy of the city council to say that in the C2 zones, if you do mixed use with 50% residential, you are entitled to get 2 floors in this case, and that's what the zoning ordinance says. Here, we're asking for 1 additional floor, and it provides additional density, which is needed, and it provides, the height, for the C2 zone, that provides the maximum height. So I think there is a intent on the part of the city to say that if you comply with certain requirements, you should be able to get the extra height. And I think that's what we're here for. I get the tinkering of the design, that's one thing, but I think that the height is another thing that is in the intent of the zoning ordinance and the intent of the council in this city to say and it provides more housing and more density in those areas where it's appropriate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Just one quick question, to go back to that. The only change to this building that from the last round of approvals, you didn't need a dimensional adjustment at that time. It was originally a 4-story building. You were providing the 2 commercial storefronts
Right.
already and 3 floors
Correct.
of residential above. Wouldn't that have been the time to
It would have,
ask for the dimensional adjustment because you were providing something that wasn't already there? Now we have something that's already been approved. And you're coming back and saying, I just want to throw another story on top.
well, I don't disagree with you, Mr. Chairman, that it would have been, the time to do it. But I think it's inappropriate to add an additional story and that it provides, density to the area that they're entitled to. So, yeah, it should have been added in the original time. I think it's a major change now. I don't think it's, you shouldn't grant it because they didn't come originally to you for it.
Any other questions of the applicant? Yes, Dave.
So would the applicant have been entitled to 2 additional stories under that logic? And they're only asking for 1?
Yeah, I know it's the policy of this board and the department to only, provide 2 additional stories if there's low to moderate income included within the extra story. So so that's the policy of this board. I may or may not agree with it, but we're not asking for 2. We're only asking for 1, aligning with the policy of this commission. I stand to be corrected on that, Bob, but that's my understanding.
I often look over to Bob for correction when I'm floundering
Yeah,
like that.
that's been our practice, when we make recommendations to the board and when we advise applicants that it would have to be affordable housing to get to 2 extra stories.
And now, mind you, I'm just being critical by asking questions. That doesn't mean I support or oppose this. I'm just asking.
Wouldn't be doing your job if you weren't challenging the applicants, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Noah.
So I was gonna ask, for clarification, so is it, by, you know, if the applicant does X, they get Y, is that just like the way?
No, it's not. And in fact,
So it has to meet.
and in fact, yeah, we've clarified that, in this most recent round of development review regulations. You have to make findings, for when you granting dimensional adjustments. Let me just. Wait a minute. Required, yeah, findings for dimensional adjustments and land development projects. So first of all, you have to find that they're eligible because it meets 1 or more of the eligibility criteria, which they do. And you have to make a finding that the adjustment is within the allowable adjustments, within the amount that's allowed, which they do. And then the third one is a little bit more your discretion, which is that the extent of the dimensional adjustment is reasonably related to the condition that makes the project eligible for the dimensional adjustment. So there's a, you know, if you find, say that they're providing mixed use, but the amount of commercial space they're providing is nominal, and your opinion is not worthy of an entire story of, you know, extra building height, you could deny it. On the other hand, you could grant it if you feel that the extent of what they're providing as an amenity is justifies the additional height.
The allowable increases are defined,
Yes, in the zoning ordinance.
5 or 6 stories.
It's in a commercial zone. It's, I'm sorry, a non-residential zone. It's, 2 extra stories. Or 24 feet in height. Yeah. They're asking for 5 feet and 1 extra story. They'd be entitled to build a 50-foot tall 4-story building without needing an adjustment.
So it's really, we're talking about 5 feet
For height.
for height, the extra story, yeah, which I like the added density.
Yeah,
And when we
I'm
break
not
it down
really
like
having a
that.
Problem with the size of the building.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand because, you know, when people come and say, well, I just don't like it, it shouldn't be that high.
Right,
Doesn't really, apply to the plan, right? And so I'm trying to explore the idea of why, you know, well, you present it as it's almost by right, you know, if I do this, I get that, and then.
no, I'll speak for Attorney Garrity when I say that he does believe it's by right. We just don't believe it's by right.
Well,
Because he's made that assertion many times, but. We're
and,
not
and,
part of
and,
it.
and your legal counsel has argued that if something has to come in front of the city plan commission and you need to make all the findings required, that there's no such thing as by right, and you know, I'll defer to counsel on this, but we've seen some decisions coming out of the new land court that have indicated that you may have more discretion than previously believed.
And I'm not faulting Attorney Garrity for his beliefs either. He's an advocate for his clients. I understand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think the thing that I'm struggling with is that we're about to discuss zoning changes or changes to the zoning ordinance that might affect some of these density. Like we're considering this case under the current zoning ordinance, the current language. But we're all also with the knowledge that changes to what incentives are offered in that zoning ordinance are most likely coming down the line. And so where I'm struggling is the mixed use incentive that we have in the current zoning ordinance, I think applies here and it's very clear. But does that rule change, does that rule change, I don't know, months from now?
So I would say that
Make this
if we want to make those changes, we should hurry up and make them, because anyone who submits an application under the current development
Right.
guidelines are subject to that, and they can't be subject to what might happen in the
Right.
future.
Yeah, you know, we're gonna talk in a little while about some of the zoning changes that we're working on. And that's definitely one of the things that has come up through our process is what is it that we want to incentivize? You know, the mixed use has been the predominant way of seeking a dimensional adjustment. You know, this board has generally been favorable of those applications. I think it's a pretty good one. You know, they're not, even though on Thayer Street, it's one of these streets where you're not allowed to have residential within 20 feet of 20 feet of the lot line on the ground floor. They could just make it a residential lobby and keep it a 4-story building if they wanted to. I think that would be missing an opportunity. I think this site needs to have ground floor retail. And I think, you know, anybody would be crazy not to do it. It's probably one of the best retail streets we have in the city, but, you know.
No offense to Lee Bogosian.
For doing that, in my opinion, I think it justifies an extra story, but, you know, we can continue to debate that as we move through the zoning.
And you know, it's to really incentivize the communication with the street level pedestrian traffic.
Yeah, I agree on this particular lot. It
Right.
makes sense. I think that whether it makes sense on all the things that come before us is maybe.
No, I think that's what that's gonna be part of our discussion
Yeah,
under
it's a-
agenda item
it's a
number
tough
6.
Part of the discussion. The other thing I just wanted to note is I think, it might not be 5 stories, but there are taller buildings or maybe a taller building on this northern part of
Yeah, I'm
Thayer.
thinking like,
I believe it has gabled roofs and I believe it's at Thayer and Bowen, but it's at least 4.5 stories. and-
It's 4 stories, and there also are some taller 4-story buildings. I think the Brown office building might be pretty tall. It's a 4-story building, but it's tall.
the
Right.
Nelson Center building, the Nelson Center building.
That's a 4-story building, and that might be it's got office space upstairs and.
Is that the one at Thayer and Bowen?
That's the one with.
No, the one at Thayer and Bowen that's a Brown University residential building. I will,
So I guess my only point is that one has gabled roofs, so it comes across, I think, differently on the street. And I am kind of curious whether there's any scope to. Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a very different type of building.
Yeah,
But I'm wondering whether I do take the comments about the street not being super wide. And so I'm wondering whether there is any scope to think about the top story being slightly set back, and potentially a different material, than the, I don't know, 3 stories below it, that would allow it to kind of read differently from that main volume. I think there's probably still a way you could get 4, certainly 3, but maybe 4 units on that top floor and have it be slightly set back.
yeah.
I'm still undecided on whether that's the right way to go, but I think it ought to be on the table as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, this is something that I think no matter if we move this forward, first we have to make the vote on the dimensional adjustment. And then we have to take a vote on the preliminary plan, and the conditions of the preliminary plan approval, would be, approving the major change, but we could also add other conditions to it, like the design changes that we were discussing and additional design recommendations that staff needs to feel comfortable with, meet the intent of our discussion here, or they can come back to us for final plan approval. Does that sound reasonable?
Final plan,
Oh, because it's a.
final plan, I think
So it's-
I think
It
final.
has to be administrative.
No, it's still a major, but I think by definition, final plan comes back. It does not come back. I think it is administrative. You could, you could, continue it for more study. I think if we're gonna do that, we'd have to look at the clock. This is a major land development project, so you have a little bit more time. You could approve it and have it go to staff, and then we would work through your comments at our staff level.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm comfortable with that, as long as we make clear comments.
Yeah, I think-
And really outline what the intent is, so that they have something they can move forward. And again, I think staff can bring it back to us and not approve final if they feel that it's not our intent. Isn't that correct? Because you could say, well, I can't approve final, we're gonna have to go back to CPC for
Well,
preliminary.
you could make that a condition.
That if the staff isn't comfortable, that it meets the intent of whatever we decide on as a condition, that they must come back for preliminary plan again.
Yeah. I think it could go through staff. The comment that I am most clear on is that the palette of that, or that light band should match or fall into the sort of dark, family of the palette that the rest of the building is.
And then while investigating other potential.
Yeah, so I bring up the setback of the top floor as a possibility. I am not clear. I'm not clear
Well,
that that
you
design
can-
wise would be better. And I
Yeah.
think,
You can see that, you know, right down the street on the Nelson Center, that top floor is stepped back, even though that's just the fourth story.
right, I
And it's
mean,
also on the corner of, right across the street from it, the newer, you know, brick facade building.
I think it's a change of materials that makes it look like a setback, but it's not.
You're right, that may not
It's
be.
not really.
You're right.
so I guess,
But then if you look directly across the street at the older Brown building where the Brown bookstore is, that's just straight up with ground floor commercial and.
wait, sorry, can you go back to that?
Yeah,
I'm working
Having
on it.
he was attempting to, I think. So yeah, you see like the Nelson Center building is, you know, step back slightly and obviously more transparency. But you look at the building right across the street and it's just straight up and down.
Right,
Um,
so I think here is where I'm landing. I think the light band is really clear. I think the setback could go in a lot of different directions, and it's hard to know at this point whether that would be worse or better. And so I'm inclined to make that not a condition.
a suggestion for discussion with staff.
Yeah, and I think, I think the other difference between this building and those buildings that we're looking at is that it has a small street frontage.
Right, it's 5,000 square foot lot. It's very small.
Right, so in some ways, its height isn't as impactful on, you know, access to light in the
Right.
street. And so,
And we're talking about 5 feet.
right, and it's not a huge change. And I think given the set of rules that we have in place right now, this is a justified change.
Yeah.
I am interested in in our discussion on item
And our
number
continuing
6,
evolving.
in just, how those rules might stay the same or change in the future. But I think in this particular instance, with the set of rules we have in place right now, the height adjustment is not huge, and it is, especially given other things that we've approved,
Right.
it is justified. I think thinking about the top story and its setback is a great idea, but I am not yet convinced that that will make things better.
Yeah, and honestly, if this is what it takes to get this project built, it's been a vacant, like, they knocked this building down in, 2020, 21. It's been years, and it's just been sitting there languishing like the same. I want something there.
I just have one more comment since we're talking about the material on the outside of the house, the outside of the building. So it's all fiber cement board. My experience with that is that the color doesn't last on it very long anyways.
I don't have enough experience with that. Building
Just drive
materials.
down to the corner of Broad and Elmwood, that building that swap built, on the corner, it's faded. Any work I've done with fiber cement,
It
3 or
doesn't
4
last.
years, we're changing colors and
Really?
it's not maintenance free, that's advertised, in my experience. Maybe there's a different product.
In your experience,
seen
has
the
there been
same
a
bit?
difference between factory finish or painted on
So we
site?
never painted them on site. We put them up with factory finish and, house built on Sycamore Street, it's fading 4 years,
I was gonna say, how long ago was that? Is it
4 or
evolved?
5 years.
That's not
The
that long.
one that Swap put up is probably a little bit older, but it needs to be painted, so. So it's not a maintenance-free surface. And the color issue, no, I'm not sure we have jurisdiction over that anyway, but it's a comment.
We have,
It's a
We have
building material
affirmatively
we're talking
placed
about.
that
it, so
we
I
have-
I'm sorry,
just want my 2 cents in there.
I'm sorry.
we have stated that we have jurisdiction over design.
Yeah, I don't know what I would suggest as an alternate, but I think, when they presented, they said that it was a maintenance-free option.
Yeah.
And it's not.
Dave, you have some opinions on this?
I agree with Noel. We have used both pre-finished fiber cement product and as well as a primed product that requires painting, both fiber cement. I don't love the product. If not put on properly, it can tend to look pretty tawdry. So I guess some of the questions we were talking about, I support the project. I think it needs to be built. I have no problem with 5 stories. Personally, I'd like to see 6 with some affordable housing. That's just my own opinion. Okay?
Any appetite there?
I'm wondering, part of my follow-on question before we get going was wondering if the developer had actually even explored that a little bit. Just curious, okay? I have no personal problem with that. I'd like to see wherever we can afford to incentivize some affordable housing. I'd like to try to do that. It's a good spot for it. These are the service, I mean, I'm looking at 32 student rentals here, bedrooms, basically. I think that's what's gonna be here, right? So
Most likely.
you're gonna need a few folks to work in those restaurants and I personally hope they could live close to where they're working in Brown and support those. That's just me, that's my opinion. But yeah, as we're here talking about this, I agree with Charlotte. They've opened this up a little bit to some discussions of, we're gonna be granting height. We certainly wanna be, I think, actively trying to work with folks to get nice projects built, density housing, but I also don't want them to look cheap and shabby in 5 years. You know, that's something that is a concern if not done correctly.
So I think we're all under seems like, we're all in agreement that the dimensional adjustment is something we can agree to. So I would propose that we move forward with that and continue to discuss the preliminary plan and any recommendations we would put forward with that. Is there something before?
I just need to make sure that on the record, you all discuss the three-dimensional adjustment findings specifically.
We did with Bob.
Yeah, and it's, we walked through each one of them, and it's also in our staff report. So if they do make findings, it's in there, and I think that, you know, so again,
It was
that they're entitled to ask for it. They're within the amount that they can ask for. And the third one is this kind of, you know, justification, the proportionality. So, you know, if you wanna just talk about the fact that they are occupying the entire ground floor with the commercial use.
2 commercial storefronts.
Yeah, they could have put residential in the back. They're not. So, you know, the amount of square footage of the additional floor area is roughly equivalent to the amount of square footage of the commercial space on the ground floor. That hasn't been a condition of yours in the past. You've allowed for additional height in exchange for a smaller amount of commercial space, but what they're proposing to provide here is an entire floor of commercial space.
I'll make a
Could
motion.
the board
that we-
just articulate that on its own terms? Please.
I thought we did, but we'll do it again.
Can they agree with what I just said?
I agree with exactly what Bob said because I was a part of the conversation. In that the justification is the first one is that they are eligible for it with the mixed use. That it's directly because of the mixed use that they're asking for this additional height, and that it's what was the third criteria? Proportional to the amount of space used for the commercial, when they're using the entire first floor, 2 commercial units. And it's about the same as the additional story requested in the dimensional adjustment. So with that, I would look for a motion to grant the dimensional adjusted based on the discussion, the staff report, and the findings in it.
So move.
I'll second.
All right, we'll go around with the voice vote. Noel.
Aye.
Will.
Aye.
Dave.
Aye.
Charlotte.
Aye.
And I vote aye. All right, now, so back to preliminary plan. And if we were to make a motion on that, maybe I can start it and then we can add to it a little bit if I don't get it absolutely correct. It would be that we vote to approve the major change based on the findings in the staff report and the discussion we've already outlined. That's number one. Number two, that the silver aluminum material be changed to a dark black or dark gray, preferably hue to match with the dark store, the dark facade Three, that the applicant work with DPD staff on materiality, and the durability thereof, along with, the positioning of that top floor, and the material discussion should also include the breaks for the spacing, the spacing of the joints, of the material that is chosen. And then, you know, the sitting of that top story, whether it's the same shape, whether it's set back, whether it's gabled, whether it's it remains the same, in the hopes that we get the best outcome for the facade of that building. And then number 4 would be processing of the final plan approval should be delegated to DPD staff.
So move.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any discussion, or is that good?
Can I just ask, do we want them to provide some sort of maintenance plan for that material, or is that gonna just be part of the discussion? Or is that impossible to require?
How would we enforce that?
Right, I think,
We can't
okay.
enforce most.
Minimum housing.
Yeah, I think it would be minimum housing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it would actually get enforced.
Okay,
Not that it's not good practice to do, or that we shouldn't attempt to. Let's just hope that the discussion. So we're okay with it? That is it. Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second, we'll go around and we'll do a vote. Noel? Aye. Will?
Aye.
Dave? Aye. Charlotte?
aye.
And I vote aye. Best of luck. Moving right along to agenda item number 4. This is a major land development project 24-051 MI at 11 West Friendship Street.
What's wrong?
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And yeah, I'll provide a quick introduction while the applicant gets ready.
Just stop you for 1 minute
Yeah,
on this. I just thought I heard major development project. I have this as a minor land development project.
I may have misspoken. I see minor land development project
And I
also.
just want to confirm that the stenographer is not required for this
That's
project.
correct.
Mm,
So that you can
Yeah.
go home.
Yes.
yeah, my apologies if I
No
miswrote
worries.
that.
Thank you.
Thank you. We hope we were entertaining for you this evening.
You were.
Okay.
It's one of my favorite places to be. I don't get to come. Fortunately, I have to figure out how to unplug my end.
Oh, here, do you need any help?
She's almost there. She's almost got it.
Yeah.
Oh, I had that.
Okay,
Oh,
you got
that,
it.
oh, awesome. Thank you.
All right. Carry on.
Sure, thanks, Commissioners. So this is a request to construct a mixed-use development at 11 West Friendship Street. There have been a number of uses on the site, but it is currently vacant. The applicant wants to construct a 4-story, 45-foot mixed-use building with retail on the ground floor and 26 apartments in the rest of the building. Now, this is considered a minor land development project as the amount of commercial space, approximately 2,000 square feet, is less than 2,500, which would make it a major land development project. They are seeking a dimensional adjustment for parking where 14 parking spaces are required. 14 parking spaces will be provided, but 26 are required. So yeah, applicants here and they can take you through the rest.
And Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure, I guess, Mr. Likens is here. He's away.
He
but,
promoted to
will be
a,
a participant in this hearing.
okay. He's been promoted and he's able to unmute, or turn his camera on, share screen, all of that fun stuff.
Great. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, John Garrett here on behalf of the applicant, Patricia Martinez, who's here with me this evening. So as this is a minor land development project, because as Cheyenne had indicated, the amount of commercial space is less than 2,500 square feet. This is a request for a 4-story mixed-use building. There is an adjustment required, we just had a lengthy discussion about adjustments, so the parking can be reduced by 50% because of the mixed-use component. So that's what we're seeking here, in order to construct 26 apartments with the two commercial, the two commercial spaces on the ground floor. Mr. Likens is a registered architect, is here, and if he's able to hear me, I'm gonna ask him some questions and able to go through the project with him, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Go right ahead, sir.
I can hear you, John. Can you hear me?
Okay. I can. I think we all can. Yeah.
Now, are you an architect or have you stayed at a Holiday Inn Express?
I'm at Hilton Head right now.
Okay.
I'm on vacation.
So, Mr. Likens, are you familiar with the project?
Yes,
And did you prepare the plans?
I did.
Okay, so can you describe the plans and the relief that is being sought in connection with this project?
Sure. So the project is a 4-story building, 2 lease spaces, commercial lease spaces on the first floor. The remaining of the first floor would be apartments. There'll be 5 apartments on the first floor as well. The lot is a long rectangular lot that narrows as it approaches Broad Street. So it has frontage on Broad Street and frontage on West Friendship Street.
Yeah, excuse me, Jeff. It's
Yes.
Bob here. Would you mind sharing your screen so that we can see these plans?
Sure. Where do I, let me see, share screen. Okay, here we go. Okay. Sure. Okay. Get back to my drawing. Here we go. Okay, can you see it?
Well, now we do.
Okay. So there you go. So yeah, so there's Broad Street, West Friendship runs the long length of the property. And as I'm mentioning it narrows down towards Broad Street down here. So this is the site plan. The first floor has those 2 commercial spaces, and there's 5 apartments here on the first floor. Towards this end of West Friendship, we have the parking. So it's a bit of a narrow lot, but this works well, I think. And then the upper floors can go to, let's see, I think this is, yeah. So that's the first floor. So this is a typical of the second, third, and fourth floor. So there we have the 7 apartments on those floors of varying sizes. There's 1 3-bedroom, several 2-bedrooms, and there's a 1-bedroom. So a little bit of a variety of choices in apartment sizes and bedrooms. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so just to be clear, we don't need any variance. This is not a unified development. It's not a variance. The only relief that we need is the parking, which is an adjustment. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So yeah, this meets all of the zoning regulations with the exception of we need relief on the parking.
And it's a minor development because of the size of the commercial spaces. That doesn't jump it to a major land development, correct?
That is correct.
Board has any other questions? Fairly straightforward, just a dimensional adjustment for parking and compliant with height.
The commercial space and the parking adjustment is why it's here. I can say that this dimensional adjustment is a little bit different than the last one because I think we're going to be talking about reducing or eliminating parking needs in agenda item number 6, as opposed to making it more hard to or changing the criteria altogether. Commissioners, do you have questions of the applicant?
I guess one question about the parking, is the calculation made based on the size of the apartments? The smaller apartments,
No, the calculation for,
number of parking.
Yeah, calculation is one space per unit.
One per unit is what's required, and they're providing less than that.
Several 3-bedroom apartments and a few small.
yeah, the calculation for required parking is 1 per unit. The adjustment is 50% under 19.
The allowed adjustment before. It's a dimensional.
Okay. One
Yeah.
over there.
Yes, and we don't, our parking requirements don't relate to the number of bedrooms in a unit. And the commercial space is exempt from parking up to, I think it's 2,500 square feet of commercial is exempt in a C zone.
Any other commissioners have questions of the applicant? All right.
So let me just summarize. I think, an important area to put 26 apartments in, almost fully compliant under the new regulations, would not have to come for the board, but for the adjustment. Reason, Bob, is that correct? We would be able to get it administratively approved, but for the adjustment. I'd suggest to you that this is, on the corner of Broad Street, which is transit oriented, so that it is certainly available to bus lines in order to do that. And you want to, again, the number of apartments in this area is important to increase the density. I think it does that. It's appropriately sized, and its height is in compliance with the requirement.
Just out of curiosity, is this planned to be market rate housing?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you, real quick, Mr. Likens, would you be able to go, I don't think we discussed the exterior of the building at all.
Okay, yes, sure.
Would you be able to go to maybe the elevations on A201 or A203?
Yeah.
Let's do a quick rundown through that for us.
Okay, there we go. So that's the West Friendship elevation. So at the commercial end, you've got the these entrances with the greater transparency, and we're putting awnings over that. As you head down West Friendship, that's where the apartments are, and so you're seeing the residential windows there. The ground floor is proposed to be a white brick, and the upper floor is a hardy plank siding. And then there's let me go to another elevation. Let's see, that one's Broad Street. It's a bit of an odd drawing in that both sides are flaring out. But so just this middle section here is what is orthogonal to Broad Street. Let me get, here we go. So this is the entrance from the parking lot. So so you have a vertical siding that's going to be curved going around the staircase. And then you still have the brick and the engineered wood siding. Oh, actually, this is not hardy plank. This is engineered wood siding. It's a product I'm actually putting on my house now. It's interlocking, full dimensional wood siding. It's not like the vinyl siding that's real thin. This is fully dimensional, but has a better maintenance characteristic, of course. In the background, there's a staircase on the back side. And that one staircase will stick up to provide access to the roof for maintenance for the mechanical equipment. Let's see, oops.
The west side and the parking lot.
Say that again, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
That was the west side on the parking lot end?
Yeah, this is if you're in the parking lot, this is what you're looking at, yes. And so these next drawings are just the transparency calculations, but still working on the color palette a little bit, but here's a bit of a three-dimensional view. You can see it a little better. Any questions?
No, thank you. I think that helps.
Very good.
Don't go anywhere. You're still
I'm
on the
here.
hook for questions. But let's hear the staff report at this time, and then we'll open up to public comment.
Sure, thanks. Thanks, commissioners. And as you see, the applicant has gone through spoken about the dimensions as well as the site design. And this does comply, but for the dimensional adjustment for parking, which we'll be talking about in a little bit. This is a C1 zone where the use is permitted by right. They did include a landscaping plan that's included in your package, and it does show that they will comply, but that plan shall be subject to the forester's approval. They also have submitted an erosion control and drainage plan. And so speaking of the adjustment, we did find that they met the criteria as outlined in section 1005B of your development review regulations, and they are eligible for reduction in parking as outlined in section 1904.E.1 and 2 of the ordinance. So based on that, we would recommend that you make a positive finding for the dimensional adjustment. As far as the preliminary plan goes, this area is intended for neighborhood commercial mixed-use development, characteristic of the type of development that you see before you. The mixed use is permitted by right. We should note that the rear portion of the lot is zoned R4, but that will be occupied by parking, which is permitted as it's accessory to this development. So the development will conform to the dimensional regulation subject to you granting the C2 zone. I'm sorry, subject to you granting the requested adjustment. And they will be in compliance with parking and landscaping based on that. We don't foresee a negative environmental impact. There are no physical constraints that impact development of the property, and adequate vehicular and pedestrian access is provided from West Friendship and Broad Streets. So based on that, we would recommend that you approve the preliminary plan subject to these conditions, that the landscaping plan be subject to the city forester's approval. The stormwater and erosion control measures shall be subject to the city engineer's approval, and that final plan approval be delegated to DPD staff.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a clarifying question? You said the back of the site, or the west side of the site is R4. So is this currently 2 lots?
Is it 2 lots or is it a split zone?
Lots that were merged. And so part of it is in one zone.
All right, so it's 1 lot that's with the split
Okay.
zone.
Yes.
I see.
Okay,
That area is gonna have accessory parking, which is
Yeah.
permitted.
it's all in the same parcel. It's not primary use parking on a separate lot.
That's right. Yeah, 1 lot. So this will be accessory parking, which would be allowed.
Which I still support.
Yeah.
And commissioners, I'd just like to add one more thing. Given that you have parking there, the applicant is required to have a tight board fence at the rear of the lot to separate it from the adjoining residential lot. So that was part of your condition as well.
Right. And there is a fence there currently, but we'll probably replace it, but it's in decent shape, but we'll probably put a nicer one there, but it exists already.
Okay. All right, it is a public hearing. At this point, we've heard the staff report, we heard the applicant's testimony. We will, at this time, open this matter up to public comment. If there's anyone here in the audience that would like to speak on this matter, please raise your hand. If there's anyone in our virtual world that would like to speak on this matter, please raise your virtual hand. And it doesn't look like there's anyone left in our waiting room. Oh, there are a couple people. All right. Last call for public comment on 11 West Friendship Street. Seeing none, we will close the public comment portion of this agenda item. I mean, I actually think that market rate housing is needed in this area as much as any other type of housing. This area of Providence gets a lot of low income housing, and I think market rate housing, as opposed to like other neighborhoods that have predominantly only market rate housing, need a mix of, low to moderate income housing. So I think this is great. It's a nice dense project. And as you'll hear, in short order, there's gonna be some discussion on, reducing parking minimums, at some point down the line. So I am in favor of this dimensional adjustment, for the parking reduction.
You just articulate the three criteria.
So the criteria, based on the criteria, which is that it's a, hang on, let me find it. As outlined in section 1005B of the development rate review regulations, the applicant is eligible for this by providing vertical mixed use development with over 50% residential, as outlined in section 1904E.1 of the zoning ordinance. And an adjustment for parking within 50% of the requirement is permitted in section 1904.E.2. And they are still having bicycle parking spaces. They're not asking for relief on that, just in the vehicular parking. And it's due to the nature of the size of the lot and what they're providing as far as residential and commercial use.
The staff report says they're providing 22 bicycle spaces. Is that really? I'm just seeing 2 racks that I think are 10, but is that?
It does say that. It says
Yeah.
5 are required, which is,
I believe the number is 22. If Jeff Likens is on there, he can confirm, but yeah.
Jeff, we're gonna allow you to talk right now. Can you discuss the bicycle parking spaces?
Yeah, let me take a look at that. I was noticing on my drawing that I did only have the 2 racks. Let me take a quick look. There's also additional parking inside the building for bicycles.
Does it equal 22 spaces?
20, yes, let's see, we got, yeah, it's going, in the total, it's gonna be 22 spaces.
Between the interior and exterior. That's good.
Right.
Okay.
Right, yeah,
Thank you for confirming that.
no problem.
So, the first vote we need to make, based on discussion, staff report and findings, including the discussion that I just had on the applicability of the, dimensional adjustment. The first action would be to, vote to grant the dimensional adjustment from the parking requirement pursuant to making the positive findings that we just made in conformance with section 1005B of the development review regulations as described in the staff report and in our discussion.
I'll make a motion to approve the dimensional adjustment.
Wait a second.
Second.
All right, we'll go around and do a voice vote. Noel?
Aye.
Will?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Charlotte?
Aye.
And I vote aye. And then, next up is a preliminary plan, and it would be to, approve the preliminary plan, based on the foregoing discussion and the subject to the following conditions: that the landscape plan be subject to the city forester's approval, include a solid fence adjacent to the residential zone, that the stormwater and erosion control measures be subject to the city engineer's approval, and that final plan approval be delegated to DPD staff. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, go around for a vote. Noel?
Aye.
Will?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Charlotte?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Best of luck.
Thank you very much.
And with that, we'll move, again, we have, save your packets for agenda item number 5. Give them back to Troy.
Yeah, just give them to us.
Because that meeting is happening next month as discussed earlier. Now we're on to agenda item number 6, which is a discussion on the comprehensive plan zoning changes.
Okay, I'll take this one. So we don't want to sort of prejudge the city council. We don't want to kind of jump the gun and assume that they're gonna approve everything that's in the comprehensive plan, but we also want to be ready so that when the comprehensive plan is approved, that we can move forward with our zoning changes pretty quickly. So I just want to kind of walk through, I don't have anything to hand out. I don't have any draft language, but we are working on this. So the first part of it, we've already done, and you've already seen, which is the map changes that are listed in the comprehensive plan. This includes changing all of the R2 zones to R3. It includes making some strategic changes in zoning, particularly along commercial corridors, where something was zoned residential but has been used for commercial by variance for some time. It includes merging the C1 and C2 zones together. And also making some areas of R3, R4. So those are the things that we've already talked about. Now the text changes that accompany these map changes, I'll talk a little bit about that. And they're in no particular order, but I'll just walk through it. So there had been a lot of discussion about our minimum lot sizes and whether we should be reducing minimum lot sizes in our residential zones. Residential zones are the only zones that we have that have minimum lot sizes. Every other zone, you're allowed to build or create a lot of any size. But in residential zones, we preserve that. And currently, for most of the zones, it's 5,000 square feet with 50 feet of lot width. In the R1A, it's 7,500 square feet with 75 feet of lot width. And in the R4, it's 3,500 square feet with 35 feet of lot width. We have decided that we don't think it's a great idea to reduce our lot area minimums for a couple of reasons. First of all, if you have an undersized lot already, you're allowed to build on it. And we recently gave property owners more permissions to build on undersized lots. Second, if we don't have minimum lot sizes, then we fear that people could create subdivisions that would result in a development pattern that would not be complementary to what's out there in the neighborhoods. That said, we are proposing that for lots that had been merged in the past, let's say there were undersized lots and they were required to be merged by a previous ordinance. We don't have that merger provision anymore, but let's say someone did that. We're suggesting that they can unmerge those lots so long as they meet certain minimum requirements. So that's one thing we're working on. That language is going to have a little bit of nuance to it, but we're creating that now. Row houses, also known as single-family attached houses. We are working on regulations whereby people can create individual lots. This would actually be the one exception from the minimum lot size. People would be able to create narrow, small lots so that they could have a attached house that has lot lines coincident with the edges of the building. So that's something we've never done before. We've allowed row houses, but they've all had to be on one big lot. So now we're creating rules so that you can have these, individual lots.
And if you remember, that discussion was primarily based around the financeability of like a single row house, like as opposed to it being a condominium, it would be on a plot and lot on its own.
Right. We're doing some research into how other communities do this. There are plenty of cities out there that have precedent for row house, and we're looking to, some zoning precedents there. Also, we're looking at, what the rules might be for multifamily, in some of our lower density residential zones. We suggest in the comprehensive plan that this could be achieved by special use permit. And we also say that multifamily would be at a lower density than what we would allow in our R4 or our commercial zones. We've already said that we want to keep the height at no more than 3 stories in the R1 through R3 zones. The question is how much open space, how much lot area per dwelling unit. So what we committed to is that we want to make sure that if people are building apartment buildings in some of these lower density residential zones, that they're in keeping with other apartment buildings that have been built in those zones in terms of the ratio of open space to built form on the property. We likewise are trying to figure out what appropriate densities would be for the R4 zone. I think we have had an example of, we've seen an example of what would be considered probably excessive density in the R4 zone. And I think we've also seen, we've done a few staff reviews of properties that have been rezoned to R4, and we've seen some much more moderate densities. And so I think we have a good sense of what's appropriate. Again, we're looking at lot area per dwelling unit as the density metric that we use. A 3-family house on a 5,000 square foot lot, that's 667 square feet per dwelling unit. 667 square feet of land per dwelling unit. So that's roughly the density of the R3 zone. What should be the density of the R4 zone? We're allowing a little bit more height. In many cases, we don't require parking. We still want yards. We still want setbacks. We still want stormwater retention and trees and landscaping. So again, we're fiddling around with the metrics there. We've come up with a menu of things that we're talking about requiring to add to our design regulations for houses in residential zones. And this is a little tricky because we're not trying to diminish the ability of people to be creative and to work in modern styles where you might not be using the traditional detailing that you see in older houses in Providence. At the same time, a lot of the buildings that are using modern materials like vinyl siding are that mimic, shingles or clapboards. They're not using any kind of the traditional materials or traditional detailing that you might see, like trim around the windows, corner boards, roof pitches that are a little more traditional. So you see these buildings that have that are 2 families and sort of have the form of a traditional 2-family, but something's very wrong about the detail. So we're trying to come up with some ways of sending a message to developers that there are minimum standards. We've talked about the idea of people using unfinished pressure treated lumber, to construct front steps and porches and railings. We think that builders have to do better than that. So we're working on those.
And this would be specifically for new permits.
Yeah. Right.
For new.
Yeah. So you come in for a permit for a two-family house and there's a checklist of things that you need to, again, if it's designed by a competent architect and it looks phenomenal, we shouldn't have to require a variance. Maybe they don't want to have window trim, but maybe that's because it's a deliberate design decision, not because they're trying to be cheap about the construction of the house.
Well, and I think that goes back to the point of a lot of the discussions that we've heard throughout the comp plan review and having more design regulation, and I think the staff is doing a very good job of that, and I think I don't think that needs to come before us. I think that should be able to be figured out at the staff level, so.
Yeah, we've seen we need to make sure that we're being consistent with state law, which generally says you've got to be explicit and objective in your standards. So, we want to make sure that we're not being arbitrary, we're not being overly subjective. Another thing, for example, a lot of these newer buildings are elevated very high out of the ground, so that they can create either a dwelling unit or living space with, sort of in the basement. And what ends up happening is you end up having these very tall staircases to get up to the first floor. And there's no reason for it, other than the fact that they didn't want to.
I have a comment, because, I put in the building for review for permit. But before that, I'd send it back to the architect and ask him if he could add another unit to that. And the design he came back with, and he hadn't done live in Providence, it was pretty much like that. Really tall staircase.
Yeah.
And I asked him why, it doesn't have to be that, I don't like it. And then said there's a requirement in the code or about entrance heights for the stairs that forces that design.
Well, in zoning, it's 2 feet above grade.
Right, and he said you couldn't, he had designed a 2 stories with half a story in the ground as part of the first unit. We were at the entrance was 1.5 feet above the ground. So I asked him to split that unit in the house. The entrance is now 7 feet above the ground. It's like, and he said that's the only way to make it work.
Couldn't get it to 2 feet.
I didn't push it because I saw the design. I said, oh, this is what everybody's making that that I don't like, and other people have commented about not liking, and it's that design that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And I just, it's an anecdotal thing, but he said there was something in the requirements.
I'd be happy to talk,
design.
I'd be happy to talk to your architect about that. Maybe there's something that I'm not aware of or something that's unintentional about our rules, but one thing we're talking about is maintaining the rule that the entrance has to be elevated at least 2 feet above the ground. Because we have virtually no tradition of entrances at grade, at least at the front of the building. But the other thing is we're talking about maybe putting a maximum of the height of the entrance above the ground, because sometimes we're seeing 12, 13 steps to get up to the first floor. So anyway, that's something we're looking at. Next thing is parking minimums. There's been a lot of discussion about whether we should simply exempt all development from minimum off-street parking requirements. This is something that planners have been talking about for over a decade, but now it seems to be something that is kind of seeping into the mainstream. Parking takes up a lot of space, and it prevents sometimes maximizing the development potential of a site. We've heard developers say if they didn't have to build so much parking, they could build more housing. And, you know, there's an argument that we should simply leave parking up to the market, and if the developer wants to build it, they should build it. If not, they don't have to, that we should utilize our on-street parking, as much as possible and pave less. So we're talking about it. We know that there are differences of opinion out there. Where we end up, I think, will be in part determined through the comprehensive planning process, but also our internal conversations as well.
Yeah, and there was a lot of discussion about this subject last evening, directly in connection with the sustainability goals that Rhode Island has to meet. You know, parking adds more impervious coverage. So much so that when I discussed, it was a point that I made to the city council last night when I was making comments on the discussion throughout the evening. And I just think we need to think about how that works, if that is the decision that goes. I'm in favor of eliminating parking minimums, just taking that out altogether, but I also want to think about you know, impervious coverage or lot coverage as well at the same time, and not just add more building footprint to a parcel. We have to think about where that stormwater is going. Another subject that I think about things on my runs in the morning, and so like I was digesting everything that had happened last night, this morning, before the light came up and anyone in my house was awake. And I was thinking, you know, to further that, there was a lot of discussion about building housing on primary use parking lots, surface parking, and why don't we prohibit surface parking lots? There's a special use permit in C2 zones. I think that should be a discussion on the table also, is to incentivize structured parking and prohibit surface parking as primary use in any zone. Like there's no need for it. It can be ancillary to a development, but having it just entire parcel have nothing but parking seems like a waste of space to me.
Yep. Okay, so a couple other things. You know, let's see, there are a bunch of sort of little tweaks that we do from time to time. Kind of a fine tuning of the ordinance when things don't seem to be working the way they should. One is that, just as an example, there are some houses that, especially those that are being used to house large populations of students, where the owners are, instead of employing the traditional roll-out bins that all of us get for our houses, they're using dumpsters. And in some cases, they're locating them in front of the house. It's terribly unsightly. Sometimes we ask the owners not to do that, and sometimes they tell us that they're gonna do it anyway. So I think these are some of the quality of life things that we need to get at through zoning. There are, let's see here, let me just, short-term rentals. We know that it's been your desire, I think, not to allow them in the R4 zone. I think that's a good practice. Question is, you know, should we evaluate our current standard, which is to allow them in owner-occupied properties in the R1, R2, and R3 zones? I think it's a conversation we're having. I think for the most part, these things work okay, but when it goes bad, it goes really bad. We've had a couple of real problem properties that have been used as short-term rentals. We've had a couple of occasions where it seems like, we've gotten some, less than truthful assertions of owner occupancy. So, you know, the question is, do you want a couple of bad apples to ruin it for everybody, or, you know, do we need to change things?
What is the regulation? If it's not owner occupied, it can't be used.
In the R1, R2, and R3 zones, if it's not an owner occupied property, you're not allowed to list it for, short-term rental.
But in R4 and C zones, you can.
Right, but how enforceable is that?
So, you're required, to register it with the state. You're required also to get a temporary use permit from the city. And as part of the temporary use permit, you're required to demonstrate that, you have received the homestead exemption, and you're required to sign an affidavit that says, that this is your primary residence.
I can
Review,
I can say that I don't know
Yes,
about
well,
every
it is.
platform, but Zillow is very up to date on that, and you have to continually like send in registration and stuff. We at one time rented a unit on a short-term rental, so I still get the emails and everything like register this, but we haven't been renting it, so I'm not registering it. But like they took our listing down, I'm not a host anymore because I haven't registered and shown them proof that I have met the criteria.
Yeah.
I can't
You
speak
know,
for all. the
it's not,
short-term
you know,
rentals.
the enforcement is not perfect, but if you know of something that's in violation, you can certainly let us know.
And is short-term rental, is that defined as 30 days? Or
30 days or less. Yep. Airbnb, yeah. Okay, let's see. So then, you know, then we get to this question of, as we consolidate the C1 and C2 zones, are there some uses that are currently allowed in C2 that maybe shouldn't be allowed in C2? And so, you know, drive-throughs, gas stations, repair facilities,
Primary use parking.
principal use parking, you know, these are neighborhood commercial zones. So I think that's a discussion, and I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on this.
And is structured parking, when we say structured parking, is that a parking garage?
Parking garage, yeah, it's structured. We would allow structured parking.
More dense
I
Yeah,
think.
exactly.
is the idea, like
Yeah.
surface lots are just a waste of space.
Yeah.
But does-
that makes so much more sense.
Does primary use surface parking really get proposed much now?
Yeah, it does. You know, honestly, we see it we've seen it in recent years for, churches. They've bought houses and adjacent to their buildings, and they've knocked them down, and then they've come for special use permits. We saw one, not too long ago. It was gonna be an ancillary lot for an apartment building. And, I think you might see a couple more of these coming in because, I'm aware that there has been some demolition and paving without the proper permission. So, something to think about. Design, is one of those things that has come up, and there's been some public, comment about wanting us to have, more design review, or even to create a new design review committee. We are not inclined to create new committees to conduct design review. However, we do acknowledge that, we can do better when it comes to our design standards, as we discussed. And also, in our processes for reviewing. I think, you know, tonight's a good example of a thoughtful way of working through the design of a project with a cooperative applicant, in such a way that it doesn't take any more time and doesn't cost any more money for the project. That's kind of the goal. we've also instituted this sort of thing at the staff level for the staff reviews. So I think we're on the right track here. So I would say those are the main issues. Just noting that it's 6:55.
Yeah, just trying to get out before that.
Well, all right.
I had a question. about-
Somebody lost a bet.
So I've heard a lot about, the demolition piece in the top plan. But my question is, well, so the last case we heard today, there used to be a restaurant on that property not too long ago, and the restaurant disappeared.
Would you mind talking into the mic a little?
Yeah, so
Yes,
the restaurant.
it is on
disappeared.
West Friendship Street.
Oh,
There was a
Oh,
restaurant
right,
there,
yeah,
yes.
okay. I thought you were talking.
Became a homeless encampment for a little bit, and so now we see that there is something gonna happen, but was the demolition permitted?
Yeah.
And then was it? So in the process is my question, right? So buy a lot that has something on you, you're gonna build something, but you don't tell anybody, and you just ask for permission to get the building down. You go to the building department, apply for a demo permit, and there you have it, you can have it. But
Yeah.
what are you gonna put on there? Well, that's not important right now, we'll get it later.
Right, so
I think that's one of the objections in the public about.
It is.
Demolition.
it is. So let's talk about this for a second. So there are some places and some types of situations where that can't automatically happen. If you're in a historic district, you have to get permission from the Historic District Commission to knock a building down. And if it's got any historic value to it, chances are the answer is gonna be no. That's also the case in downtown, okay? So, we're talking about, a significant, imposition on, unfettered property rights. If you come in front of the City Plan Commission with a land development project, once you apply, if there are buildings on that site, you can't knock them down until the process is complete and you have final approval. But if you want to take the buildings down before you apply, you can do that. And in any other place in the city and for any other kind of project or property, you're allowed to take down your private building if you want. We had a couple of months ago, a very public demolition of 3 houses at the corner of Brook Street and Angel Street. And those, that was allowed. There was no land development project proposed at the time. There had been a while back that was the hotel. Remember that? But that project was done, it was withdrawn, so there was nothing pending. The property owners seemed to have made a decision that they didn't want those buildings on the site anymore. Why? It seems that they weren't gonna continue to rent them. They're carrying costs for vacant buildings, property taxes, fire protection, insurance, and so forth. It's an ongoing liability. And for whatever reason, they decided that they didn't want those buildings on the site. Now, that's allowed. There have been some recent changes to the code of ordinances where there has to be a lot of notice sent out and there's got to be a little bit of a delay. The council person has to get notified, but you're allowed to unless there's some kind of protection, you're allowed to take down a building. I would say overwhelmingly, that is not something that people are doing, just because, buildings have tremendous value in this city. And, we used to see a lot of demolitions of vacant and abandoned properties, but we don't have that right now. And I think, demolition for new construction in places that have been upzoned, that's also been a concern that's been articulated. And the response is, well, yeah, that can happen. And that's part of a transition from, from lower density to higher density, which is one of the things that we say we want in the comprehensive plan. This 5-story building on Thayer Street, in order for that to be built, 2 very small buildings had to come down. So
And I'd argue that those buildings came down in 2020,
yeah,
like 2019, like a long time ago.
I mean, usually
And
it's-
they've been sitting there. Usually it's faster, but that doesn't protect the building from the parcel from sitting abandoned for quite some time. It's been years that that's been sitting like that.
So, I think the question is, to what degree is it in the public interest to prohibit somebody from making that decision about their house? I mean, it's clear if you're in one of these protected districts, you just can't do it. But, if I own a house, I buy a piece of property and, I want to plant trees on it and I really don't like the house that's on it. And I want to take it down and I want to preserve the property for a time when I might want to build on it at some point. The law says that I can do that. And for some people, that's deeply offensive because they feel that perhaps the public has the right to view that piece of property, or the right not to view a vacant lot, or the right to have a consistent, beautiful streetscape composed of other people's properties. So, I mean, it's a legitimate question as to, when we want to impose this sort of regulation on somebody.
Yeah, there was a comment it was outside of the city council meeting, but I heard a city councilor, I can't remember who it was. They were talking to someone who was talking about vacant buildings and saying, well, maybe we as a city need to start thinking about taxing vacant lots at a higher rate than residential rates. I think there was someone in the public who talked about it as well, like public comment for the comp plan. Different ways to decentivize, demolishing buildings and leaving parcels vacant. The other one they talked about was, surface parking lots, tax those at a higher rate, as opposed to like other things. So the city council is also having these discussions, it's not just us, everyone's talking about, what do we do here? How do we get to the end goal?
Yeah, and this city, we also heard a lot of discussion in the comp plan about, well, why don't we just build out the vacant lots, the parking lots that we have before we allow anything to be demolished? There's a presumption here that we have control, the city, everybody in the city has control over somebody's parking lot or someone's vacant land. No, we don't. We can't make anybody build anything.
Chris Tompkins was the most vocal proponent of density that I had heard, but it was for like parcels that other people own.
But yeah,
it was a good argument. And there's a lot of wasted space. But I don't know that really moves the needle.
What I've learned in doing this job is that developers tend to build on the land that they already own. And if they don't own some other piece of land that the city wants them to build on, we can't make them buy it and we can't make them build on it. And we also can't make the person that owns that land sell it.
Yeah.
And I would submit, that's the reason why, despite the best, most permissive regulations in the city, North Main Street has seen zero development over the past 10 years. It's not because the zoning's not right. It's because the people who own the property aren't interested in doing what we say we want there. So, this is where we are. I think honestly, the good news, despite what I would consider to be a little bit of fear mongering, the good news is that we don't see a lot of demolition in this city.
Yeah, there's some, like the Airbnb issues, there are some really high profile headline grabbing ones that people pay attention to, but those are actually few and far between. Which is a good thing. Right?
Yeah.
And then alongside that, I mean, this is just the zoning stuff, but we need to keep thinking about our development review guidelines as well and criteria for density, things like
Yeah.
that as we evolve. I mean, all these things are gonna take shape, as soon as this goes through the comprehensive plan gets through the city council, we're gonna make these major changes to our land use regulations. And I think that we could know what direction the comp plan is going by our next meeting.
I expect we will. Yeah, October 2nd, it could be voted and sent to the full council.
I think we'll have a pretty good idea by our October meeting, what that comprehensive plan is gonna look like.
Now, one more question on the lot sizes you were talking about way at the beginning. R4 has the smallest lot size requirement.
Yes.
And then you were talking about allowing density in the R4, like, how do we figure that out? And so is a bigger lot with an R4 zone allowed to have more units?
That's the idea, is that the bigger the lot, the more units you can get. Right
So-
now,
So if you had a smaller lot, because, there was some proposal, I don't think it got here yet, but putting 9 units on a 3,200 square foot lot that got zoned up to R4.
yes,
It's a tiny lot, with a lot of units.
yeah.
I don't know if it's not commercial.
But if you can, so the question is, with R4, you've got front, side, rear setbacks. As the lot gets smaller, those can get tighter under the new state law. And then you've got 4 stories. So within that, what's the right amount of units? We're not requiring parking. This is kind of a great experiment in residential density.
Do we have minimum unit size?
We don't. The building code does, but it's minuscule.
How minuscule?
But that's where I think the market takes over in terms of if we say you can't have short-term rentals. So people have to want to live in your unit
Yeah,
Right.
for some amount of time.
Yeah, and I mean, I think R4 definitely needs to have prohibition of short-term rentals.
Right,
Full stop.
but I think like between the number of dwelling units per square foot of lot size.
yes.
And the fact of no short-term rentals, I think that's what we're hoping dictates how many units get
Yeah.
put into these.
But I think we will have some standards. I think there's gonna be a metric of lot area per dwelling unit. I just don't know exactly what it is. It'll be higher than R3.
Right, yeah, it would have to be higher than what's currently allowed in R3 for it to make sense.
Yeah.
Because we want R4 to be more dense, but
Right,
still have the same criteria of a residential zone. That you have to meet these, landscape, side yard, rear yard, et cetera.
I had another question about minimum lot sizes, because I feel like we see so many cases that almost are just like, in most cases, they kind of breeze through here of us granting dimensional relief on minimum lot size and
Yes,
for either not having the 50 feet or not having the 5,000 feet or, whatever it might be. I guess I'm wondering, you said that you're not inclined to change minimum lot sizes. Is there I guess I'm curious, do 90% of our cases that we see on minimum lot size adjustments fall within 10% of?
so, yeah, good question. So,
They're ones we don't see.
so first of all,
Oh, that's what we already, okay, so we
Yeah.
already wrote that in the last, okay, I'm not remembering that.
yeah, so first of all, it depends. Something you see, somewhat regularly is a situation where there's more than one house on a residential lot. And in those cases, we support variances for whatever lot size is necessary for each of those houses to be separated.
Right.
Because we think it's in the public interest to allow those to be on separate lots. But if it's, say, a large lot that has some open space and let's say it's 10,000 square feet and they can get the 50 feet of frontage on both 50 feet of lot width, on both lots and meet all the setbacks for the existing house and everything, that's administratively approved. And also what is almost administratively approved is lot size and lot width within 15% of that we can approve through what's called administrative modification. So we can take it down, what's 85% of 5,000, it's like 4,250 or something like that. So as a practical, matter, it's not really 5,000, it's 4,250, and it's 85% of 50 feet. So already there's that allowance. And if they're coming to you for unified development review, maybe because somebody objects to the administrative modification, we're saying if it's anything below 15%, we're not going to support it. You're probably going to see one of those next month.
Okay.
But again, so we're trying to make this exception where, if historically it had been two lots that for whatever reason had been merged, we would allow those to be unmerged.
Would that account for really small lots?
Well, I think we're gonna have a minimum. They can be unmerged as long as the lot size is something, I think we're saying like 2,500 square feet, which is pretty tiny, but there's plenty of houses on 2,500 square feet in this city.
And then we could go back no matter how many owners people.
Yeah, if you can demonstrate to us that it used to be more than one lot, we would, this would be administrative.
I had a question on the upzone from R2 to R3. I run into so many multifamily homes that are two-family, they have the illegal third unit. What is the process? So say you own like two-family that has an illegal third and this upzoning goes through, do you have to verify that with the city?
Yeah, yes. So you need to, our zoning official has a process of documenting the legal use of a property. And if the legal use in her records are a two-family, and if you have this third unit, you have to demonstrate that it complies with zoning, and there has to be a building inspection to make sure that the unit complies with applicable codes. I don't know if they make you rip out the walls so they can look at all the plumbing and electrical, but they do some kind of an inspection, and they're certainly looking at means of egress. And in some cases, this is already happening because we now we allow for three families on smaller lots now. So a lot of these folks are starting to trickle in. They end up going in front of the building board for some relief for staircases and things like that.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a process there is now, and there will continue to be.
And then also, so was there something with sprinklers that was voted in recently? This is kind of.
Yeah, it didn't pass, but I think Dave could probably talk about this.
Dave's still working.
Yeah, that'll be going back in the General Assembly. It passed the House 69-0. But one of the reasons why that was somewhat immaterial is that has to be married up with the new building code change, the annual building code review in 2024. So I don't think anybody's objecting to that, but that'll also make it easier for the two families that were pre-existing threes to be brought forward to the code, because the code will allow for the relief necessary, excluding the sprinklers, like it would in a 1 or 2 family code. So all these things are coming into alignment. I guess
Fire alarms, things like that.
correct. In other words, to add quote that third unit will not require it to be kicked into the quote current code, if you will. which is technically in most cases what's required.
Which is the building code, which is more stringent than the fire code.
Correct,
Which is
yeah.
backwards.
That's, right, trying to get this all figured out on multiple levels is taking a few years.
And when do we think this is all gonna be material? All these upzoning, all this stuff, is this like March of next year or?
What we're talking about for zoning changes to implement the comprehensive plan, we hope to have you, draft language probably, if not October, then November.
Wow.
Yeah, we want to move this along. I think it's really critical. I think, people are clamoring for it. We see the developers, continually asking us about these things, so, we think it's important. Maybe just one last little discussion about development incentives. And
One thing before we move on to that, because it goes back to the city plan, or the comprehensive plan. There were a lot of people who complained about the content, not complained, but had concerns or changes they'd like to see. Not one person got up and said, I didn't feel like I had the information, or I didn't feel like I was able to participate in, and most people, even the ones who were critical of some of the language in the comp plan, gave kudos to the years-long process and the amount of meetings that, I saw Tim was here earlier, so he's gone now. That Tim, Bob, and the whole DPD staff did throughout this process. So I commend that. There was not once, and I brought this up to the city council as well. There was not once where someone said, I just wasn't able to get the information I needed. Because that wasn't, well, you wanted it presented in a different way. But.
You there for my testimony?
okay, all right, so, let's just talk about incentives for a second. So in the comprehensive plan, we say, amend regulations as needed to establish incentives for greater height and density in exchange for affordable units, public open space, that would be on the site, sustainable development, and other desirable public amenities. No additional height should be allowed in residential land use designations. Okay, so in the R zones, 3 stories in R1, R2, R3, 4 stories in R4, that's it, no additional height. Potential additional density, if you, in other words, more units than would normally be allowed, especially if it's affordable housing. But in the commercial zones, we're still talking about well, we don't say it, but what I'm thinking is still the 1 or 2 stories, but maybe we're a little bit more explicit about what gets you what. And so, there's been the discussion about, I think affordable units, that's solid. Sustainable development. So what does that mean? I've heard Dave talk about no burning of fossil fuel in the building. Does that get you an extra story? Does that get you an extra 2 stories? Does that get you more density?
I mean, I think a big issue we have throughout the city is we're finding that due to climate change, our city is not built for the large rain events, and our stormwater system can't handle it. So I think, stormwater can be a discussion around this as well. I mean, that's something, maybe we add that to our development guidelines, but also in places where they're exempt from stormwater, maybe that is something that gets you additional points.
Is anyone exempt from stormwater on under development?
Well, so this is interesting. I need to understand this a little bit better. There's the city stormwater regulation that kicks in at half an acre in commercial zones, and I think an acre in residential zones. Most of the time, when we see stormwater management required, it's because of the Narragansett Bay Commission.
Yeah, we had this conversation about how is it important, like who actually manages this?
Right.
On what types of lots and at what point in the design process?
It's not super clear. I went to tour a new two-family house, and they had put in an entire infiltration basin under their backyard because the Narragansett Bay Commission required it.
Really?
Really?
Oh, yeah, like you, yeah.
So I don't know if that's,
Being done in every two families.
I don't think it is. I think they have kind of like the ideal, and then it can be negotiable. But I don't know to what degree it's negotiable.
Yeah,
That's something we need to maybe do a little work on.
Yeah, then I see street flooding consistently, is an issue, and
yeah,
impervious coverage throughout the city is an issue, and that is also, part of our sustainability goals is to meet the climate impacts of a warmer planet.
yeah, and I actually, well, I think there's scope in some of these incentives to say, I guess because we see some way more often than others, like mixed use is
Yeah.
very common versus public open space.
Yeah,
which
nobody ever does that, although you might see one next month.
That will be the first one that I've seen.
Yes.
on this
And the
commission.
public open space has been. That's been a tough one, because most people use like a public right of way and put an amenity on the public right of way as
Right.
their public open space. We've
That's
seen
not,
it, And we've said that's not the
well,
intent.
a judge has actually told us that. The intent is that you,
Yard public.
yes. There's a development that you might see next month that is waterfront property, and they're proposing a public pathway and a kayak launch.
Well, that actually.
Yeah, that's
sounds
valid,
like
that's
an
valid.
incentive.
Huh?
Going through your yard. I mean, like, I think my house on Chapin would have the only yard on the street.
Well, you're not gonna get, I mean, that's not really gonna be available for a house.
No, but say, so if there was nothing there built, but I wanted to build. Does this apply only to non-R1?
This would be land development project.
Yeah, this would really be just for land development projects. Yeah,
That are asking for density or for asking for homes,
Like in an R4.
height or density.
yeah, or like what we saw today, the C2 zone.
But I guess my point was, some of these are easier to achieve than others, and because we're upzoning, because generally there's been a lot of upzoning, it feels like it should be. You should have to do really do something. to
So
get
this is
extra
the
height.
draft language from the comp plan you have up on the screen, right?
Yeah.
So the language, again, it doesn't say mixed use, it says.
We didn't put mixed use in there, doesn't mean we couldn't, so
But like, that's the one that gets the most use, because it's the easiest to achieve.
other desirable public amenities.
Right, but I guess, so where and this is at the very beginning of my thinking about this, but I feel like across the board, people on this commission have talked about affordable housing, which is hard to do, and sustainability, which depending on what you make the metric, it's hard to do.
Mhm.
And maybe there's some open space or impervious coverage thing that is also hard to do. And I feel like if you do those, you should get more than if you do something that.
Do you want to get like a two-tiered system, like we
And maybe
did
that
with the
makes it too
affordable
complicated.
housing? I mean,
A point
system would
system
be-
is one way to do it.
would be specific and objective, which is the
Right.
intent of the State
Yeah.
Enabling Act currently.
But you have to do it so it's geared towards not just, some fantasy of what we think we want. It's geared towards something that's actually achievable. And that is gonna, that will realize the goal.
Right.
I mean, you might, I don't know how you feel about this, about ground floor, commercial or mixed use. I think it's actually pretty good.
So I agree, like, the case tonight, if that was residential on the ground floor, that would have been unfortunate.
Yeah,
Because they could have done everything within 20 feet from Thayer Street, they could have created residential housing.
They could have, you know, if they had done a 20-foot deep residential lobby,
Oh, yeah,
that would
right.
be, that would
They
be
could have a
allowed
20-foot deep residential lobby and then residential units beyond
in the
that,
back.
and that's it.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it's not worth anything, I just think some of these other things rarely get done. And if there were enough of a carrot to do them,
Yeah, I agree. I think like the commercial space, while beneficial in a lot of aspects, should be like the lower, like it is right now with affordable housing, where you only get that second story with affordable housing. I don't know. I agree. I think there should be more.
So are you saying we need to up the incentives? I'm just asking.
Yeah.
I mean, is this, like, I'll give you a quick example. If you just wanna build a building with no combustion, that's pretty easy. right?
yeah, so I actually, rather than just having it be no fossil fuel,
No,
I almost think it should be like
Like-
net zero or.
Right.
Or pass building or something.
And that's, yeah, that's harder.
Yeah.
But like you said, all right, your incentives are aligned with, you know, goals, I guess.
Yeah, I think this
But,
is
yeah.
something that we need to continue to deliberate. Like, I'm gonna keep thinking about it on my runs.
Yeah.
When you walk your kid in a stroller, you know, down the street and unwind. Whatever you do to like sort of zone out and think about it. I unfortunately do that too often. I think about this stuff a lot. But I don't think we're gonna get there tonight, but I think this is the discussion. We wanna start thinking about this and moving this forward.
We talked a little bit about maintenance costs for that building and the one we talked about. There is a way to measure that in the pro formas that you do for development.
Right, but we
You
don't
have to
see
have,
those pro formas.
We don't see them, but somebody sees them, at least the developer does.
Yeah,
Right, if he has money for maintenance 20 years down the road.
right, but some people are building and flipping, some people are,
Yeah.
you know, like,
Well, I
not
understand,
assuming
but
they're
if
not gonna
you-
have it in
you're
10 years and not
building
care.
and you're planning to not maintain,
Right,
which, you know, I don't do maintenance-free buildings anymore because they don't exist. Even if you have it, right?
It's a fallacy.
But, you know, people ask for them
Right,
and I'm sure, anyway, it's just a thought, there's gotta be a way to. Because if you don't set money aside for maintenance in your development
Right.
plan, it's not gonna happen. Or you're gonna go,
right, but and most, yeah, I mean,
and I know pro formas are manipulated all the time.
they are, and we're not gonna see behind that curtain either, and again, that's a policing aspect to, you know, development, which we need to take a little harder stance on, I think, because we've been told we're not doing enough to review design. Like, that's been a consistent theme, that we need to be more involved in design review, and that the planning department needs to be more involved in design review so that we don't keep getting these. I think someone actually used the word, it was like Costco, like Walmart architect. Not like that they are the ones who designed those buildings. They're like, they bought them at Costco or Walmart. I don't know who they were speaking to, but it was just the feel, the sentiment of the way the buildings look throughout the city, most recent buildings there. So,
Would an easy incentive be, because a lot of these lots are small in their own rights, instead of having, put like some free public space that's gonna be crummy and 20 by 20, to have them donate, forced donation, 50 grand or something to the Parks Department, to allow them to get that.
I think we gotta be a little careful about that.
Or donations back.
Yeah, well, like, we're not allowed to do what's called contract zoning, which this sort of sounds a little like. But I don't know, I mean, I think maybe the question to mull over the next month or so is, what do we want, and what's it worth to get it?
yeah, what do we want? How do we want to incentivize it?
Yeah.
But I think that point of trade-offs is an important one, right? Because at some point. Yeah, certain things might not be worth it based on the character of the built environment
Right.
that it's gonna create.
Yeah.
So the question, I'm seeing this happening, is someone comes into your office and say, I wanna build 100 units. And you could say to them, all right, here's my goodie basket of things I'm willing to talk to you about. If you give me, these high priority items, I can give you some juicy incentives. Because what's happened in the past with a lot of cities is, yeah, we have aspirational goals, but they don't align with the incentives really
Yeah,
well.
right,
Okay,
right.
and I'm hoping that they'd be able to walk into your office and the first go and say, hey, why don't you think about this? Where my, folks in the city are receptive to affordable housing, environmental concerns. I forgot what else. Those are my top two.
Yeah.
Hey, all right, I know you might not be thinking about it. Right, that's, that was, I think we do a pretty good job of that. I think that was an unfair, I think that's unfair. Like, I mean, people do have rights to do what they do. I think I'm kind of tired of hearing about it. I mean, okay, you don't like it, that's fine, but it's not just, like, oh yeah, we don't care. I mean,
Right, Yeah.
like, I get that. So, all right, so if people get the idea, if the incentives are aligned with what we want.
Yep.
Well, I think that's a good conversation to end the evening on. And, think about these things. This is just a discussion for informational purposes. We'll continue these discussions, as it progresses, and I think we're gonna have a lot more feedback from the city council by the next meeting. And Lav, I lost again. Oh, well, one of these days, I'll estimate it correctly. I guess we'll entertain a motion to adjourn at this time.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a great evening, guys.